it won't tear well the other way. And we tear them in strips. And a large paper-mache object, you could actually paper-mache in strips and cross-hatch them together, but we're working on very tiny things. So I'm going to be making patches this size. That's actually too big of a size. These little patches work better on tinier objects. So we always get our patches prepared so we don't have to tear anything with hands that are not dry. So I have all the children prepare the patches, and we have piles on the table next to the paper-mache. On this particular project, we're making calakas, which are supposed to be skeletons, and we wanted a black surface to paint white paint on, which is what Ashley's working on here. The smaller patches adapt better to the different stances and way the actual calaka is going to be standing or their position. I like little strips, and every artist gets a better feel for what they need on their particular calaka. When you get inside on a recessed or concave curve, you need real tiny ones to fit in really well. On the outside edges, where it's convex, it's not as critical. And this is where we put our patches, and we have a huge amount torn, so one day we'll just be tearing patches, then the next day we'll be just getting really goopy and messy. But you don't want to ever have the dry stuff get around your wet goopies, because that'll be a big mess. So you have a tearing area in your room, or you do it at a different time. And you can tear a lot of patches at once if you hold the strips together. I try to even separate them there too, because sometimes they stick together. And since we've already gone past a lot of the projects with the newspaper stage, I'm going to help Ashley tear some black patches now. I'm sure people have seen the reindeer that are done with the paper sacks from the grocery store. It's the same thing. They wanted a brown surface, so they used that. This is wheat paste. It used to be used to put up wallpaper. You could buy it at hardware stores. Now you cannot buy it at hardware stores in such big quantity, so you have to go to an art store to buy this. We will show you how to make your homemade wheat paste for paper-mache with flour, water, and white glue. But the thing you need to know about wheat paste is that you add the dry to the wet, which was totally against most people's ways of thinking. Dry to wet. And it looks really goopy. And you do small amounts, mix it in before you add the next batch of dry. I have very, very cold water, and the lumps will become dissolved. If you use more the next day, this will become very watery no matter how thick it is. And sometimes you have to have more wheat paste the next day. But it's already starting to get thick, and I only put a handful and a half in it. And it does stay pretty well with a Tupperware lid with a lid overnight. And even if it smells bad, it still works. I tell the kids that all the time. I'm going to add another handful. It's already getting pretty thick. And you want I tell the kids the consistency of like mustard, thick mustard. It's already there. It really gets thick. It's already at a good consistency. I could make it a lot thicker, but it doesn't spread on as well. And it mixes up that fast. It mixes up faster with warm water, of course, and this is very icy cold from the tap. And when I start the kids off, I tell the one that mixes it up with me at the table to use that hand as the one to, you have to put a lot of the paper-mache on your surface, your figure, or whatever you're paper-macheing, and get it very wet and goopy. And then you can hold one hand dry and then put the paper-mache paper on. Ashley, will you show them how to do that? And then click.
Wouldn't hurt.
I'm applying the paper-mache and the dry paper strips or little patches. You have to have the surface of your object of art already wet with goop. Keeping this hand dry so I can hold, I'll work on one area, let it dry and work on another area. So I can pretty much probably paper-mache a lot on the top. He's got some wet, or not some wet, he's got some rough surfaces that I'm trying to smooth out for him. Again, we're going to paint bones on them with white house paint, so it doesn't really make that much difference. Now this is a very large patch. I'm going to have to apply this probably to an area that's wide so I can smooth it down without wrinkles. Now, if it's a surface that needs to be very smooth, you have to be a lot more careful than we're being. Since this is folk art, we're not that concerned about that. Ashley's paper-mache has gotten very thick. It still works, but it can, you know, we can add a little more water and loosen it up now. But that's the second day. Mm-hmm. Mine's still very loose. And again, I'm applying it, making it very, very soft so I can smooth the patches on it. Newsprint. It doesn't paper-mache as well, and it doesn't bend as well because of the ink covering all of the paper. I roll it loosely. Pipe cleaner. The craft ones are looser, but in this assignment it doesn't make a difference. They're also longer. I tell the children to do it as tightly as possible, like a twisty. When you're doing your bread, twisties would even work, probably. But we need the length of the pipe cleaner. This is very tight and will not come undone.
Okay.
Pairs lengthwise. That's how it's set up on the spool. You can't tear the other way. I use half a sheet for the head, and this is very loosely wrinkled. And we go around this, and we twist around, and the warmth of your hands with wood is really the secret to any of this when you're crunching paper. And the boys with really big hands can work this one well. Okay, stop. Now we just tape to shape, and we try not to use a lot of tape because the paper-mache doesn't stick to the tape well. And I put a little bit of tape attached so we have some neck there. As long as we have some sort of oval look. And I've torn some tape into long strips because I don't want a lot of tape. And you get somewhat of an oval shape. And it can be moved up. This is when you decide where you're going to put the holder, because we are going to hang these when they dry. This can either be snipped off or hidden by a hat, depending on what kind of figure you have. I'm putting that down. I'm going to tear.
Okay, it's going.
Another double, it's one sheet, just folded. And again, I roll them together with the fold. You could open it up and do a lot more rolling. But it's very loose, so I can crunch it. Softness in my hand. I grab it 1/3 of the way. And I put it around the neck, kind of like a shawl. I'm trying to crunch as much as I can down. The short part comes forward. Some people could use this as a big shoulder too. Now we're starting to form the personality of the creature. I wrap the short end around for the torso. And we do have a bend going on. A lot of people tape too much here at this point. This is the back, and I will put a piece of tape here and maybe one here to keep the spinal column looking correct. And the bending has to do with the warmth of your hands. So now we're getting a side view. And of course, skeletons don't have much hips or rear end, so we're not worried about that. I'll put that down. I'm going to do the leg. This again is a single sheet, double. And this is going to serve as the legs. And the looser we roll here is where we're going to tuck the feet in. If you want to have feet in angles, that's up to you if you want it or not. And I take the long part and now I basically do it sort of like what someone said, diapers. And then I add more reinforcement to the back and the spinal column. And if you want a waist, crunch it in there. But once the tape's on, it's hard to shape. Now we've got the basic shape. I can put bend here, I can crunch, I can put positioning in. And the arms are long enough to use wrists. The legs, however, are not really long enough to be a full-length leg. So I will show you how to attach the feet that I do. Otherwise, you cut this off and make it balanced. Okay, so this is going to be the feet, because if we leave the arms this length, the legs have to be longer. If I was going to use these legs as is, then I would cut some off right here to make the arms shorter and more in proportion to the human body. But it's folk art. Who cares? I fold the corner and I really just start in a triangular type thing and I crunch it. That's the foot. It's just crunch. And then I will twist this. Twisting gets a lot of strength. I twist this very tightly. Twisting has strength and has, I don't like putting the ankle in the shape yet, but that could be how we do it. Now is where I leave this open. I can tuck that in. And now I go around and I will tape this right here. You have to make sure the foot is attached to the leg. Otherwise the leg will come straight out. Just as we made sure the pipe cleaner was attached to the arms. You don't want anything being able to be pulled out by weight of the wet paper-mache. Now's when I start looking at where the head is. Which way do I want this to go? And I realize I want the leg to go this way because that's pointing with the head. So I will take this long tape and actually make it like a stirrup to make sure that it's shaped that way. And now since it's so loose, this is when you can make muscles and knees. One child did a skateboard, so he put great big knobby pads around the knees. And it's now just bending, and how do you want the position? Wherever you have a joint, you need to have it taped in that position, and not a lot of tape.
Sub could use it.
And truly, I think people learn more without an audio. I think their ears take away from their brain. Checking for proportion. Now the beauty of leaving this loose is if one leg's a little longer than the other, you can move it and make it right. As you go forward, you're going to have to be sure to tape the joint at the hip and at the knee. Warmth of the hand and taping. How do you want him marching, Steve? The camera has an opinion here.
I turn it all angles to make sure it looks the way I want it to. I realize it's coming out a little bit, so I'm going to bring it in a little bit here and probably tape right there.
But
At this point, this Kalaka is creating himself. I'm just seeing what looks good. I think he's dancing. With a little bit of a twist.